Bullies stripped her shirt in front of Crush. She sent him flying. Kendra Thorne had always been the kind of person who preferred shadows to spotlights. At Jefferson High School, she moved through the hallways like a ghost, her oversized flannel shirts hanging loose over her small frame, dark hair falling across her face like a curtain she could hide behind. She was the girl teachers forgot to call on, the one who sat alone at lunch with a book propped against her thermos, the one who had perfected the art of being invisible. What nobody knew about Kendra was that every evening after school, she drove 20 minutes outside town to Master Kim's martial arts studio, where she had been training in mixed martial arts for the past 6 years. Her father, a former Marine, had insisted she learn to defend herself after her mother's death, and Kendra had thrown herself into the discipline with a quiet intensity that surprised even her instructor. She could throw a grown man twice her size, could break boards with her bare hands, and had won 3 regional tournaments using a fake name to avoid attention. But at school, she kept this side of herself locked away, believing that violence only bred more violence. The trouble started 3 weeks into the semester when Blake Morrison decided she would be his new target. Blake was everything Kendra wasn't: loud, confident, with the kind of easy smile that made teachers overlook his cruelty, and the broad shoulders that made other students step aside when he walked down the hall. His best friend Tyler Kane followed him everywhere, a stocky kid with mean eyes who laughed too loud at Blake's jokes, and together they had made Jefferson High their personal kingdom. It began small, as these things always do. A shoulder check in the hallway that sent Kendra's books scattering across the floor, comments about her thrift store clothes that were just loud enough for others to hear, the classic move of pulling out her chair just as she was about to sit down in the cafeteria, leaving her standing there red-faced while the surrounding tables erupted in laughter. Kendra endured it all with gritted teeth, her father's voice echoing in her head. "Pick your battles, sweetheart. Some fights aren't worth winning." She would gather her books, straighten her chair, and continue on as if nothing had happened. But Blake seemed to take her silence as permission to escalate. The library became his favorite hunting ground. Jefferson High's library was a sprawling space with high ceilings and rows of stacks that created perfect hiding spots for ambushes. Blake would wait until Kendra was deep in the biography section, then appear around the corner with Tyler in tow, knocking books from her hands or making loud comments about her appearance that echoed through the quiet space. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly librarian, was too overwhelmed managing the circulation desk to notice what was happening in the back corners. The gymnasium was another battleground. During lunch periods, when Kendra tried to find a quiet spot to eat behind the bleachers, Blake would inevitably find her. He had a talent for making his harassment look accidental, bumping into her so hard that her sandwich fell apart, accidentally kicking her backpack across the floor, or simply standing too close while making comments about how she probably ate lunch alone every day because nobody could stand to be around her. But it was in the main hallway, right by the trophy case near the principal's office, where Blake's cruelty reached new heights. The morning rush between classes created the perfect audience for his performances. He would spot Kendra trying to navigate through the crowd and position himself strategically, timing his moves so that she would walk directly into some humiliating trap. Once he stretched his leg out just as she passed, sending her tumbling into a group of cheerleaders who shrieked and pushed her away like she was contaminated. Another time, he grabbed her backpack as she walked by, unzipping it and dumping its contents across the floor while students stepped over her belongings and kept walking. Through it all, Kendra maintained her silence. She had learned early that fighting back only made bullies work harder to break you. Her father had taught her that true strength sometimes meant enduring, and her martial arts training had instilled in her a respect for the power she carried. Master Kim always said that with great ability came great responsibility, and Kendra believed that using her skills against untrained opponents would be like bringing a gun to a fist fight. But Blake Morrison was just getting started. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon in late October. Kendra had been looking forward to this day for weeks because of one person, Marcus Rivera. Marcus was new to Jefferson High, having transferred from California when his father got a job at the local factory. He was quiet like Kendra, but in a different way, confident in his silence, comfortable in his own skin. He had kind eyes and an easy smile, and he was one of the few students who actually acknowledged Kendra's existence with a nod or a quiet hello when they passed in the halls. Marcus had been assigned as her partner for a history project on the Civil War, and they had been meeting in the library after school to work on it together. For the first time in months, Kendra had something to look forward to each day. Marcus actually listened when she talked, asked thoughtful questions about her research, and made her laugh with his dry observations about their classmates. She had begun to hope that maybe, just maybe, she was making a real friend. That Thursday they had arranged to meet in the library after school as usual. Kendra arrived early, spreading out their materials at a table near the windows, where the afternoon light was best. She had even worn her nicest shirt, a soft blue sweater that her aunt had given her for Christmas, instead of her usual oversized flannel. She kept glancing at the door, waiting for Marcus to arrive with that easy smile of his. But Blake Morrison arrived first. He strutted into the library with Tyler at his side, both of them grinning like they had just won the lottery. Blake's eyes scanned the room until they found Kendra, and his smile widened. He whispered something to Tyler, who laughed and rubbed his hands together like he was warming up for a show. "Well, well," Blake said, loud enough for the other students scattered around the library to hear. "Look what we have here. Little Kendra all dressed up. You got a date or something?" Kendra's heart sank. She had hoped that maybe, just this once, Blake would leave her alone. "I'm just studying," she said quietly, not looking up from her books. "Studying," Blake repeated, making the words sound dirty. "Right. Hey, Tyler, you think maybe our little mouse here is meeting someone? Maybe she's finally found somebody desperate enough to hang out with her?" Tyler snickered. "Who would want to hang out with that? She probably had to pay someone to sit with her." Kendra felt heat rise in her cheeks. She focused on her notes, trying to ignore them, hoping they would get bored and leave, but Blake was just getting warmed up. "You know what I think?" Blake said, circling around to stand behind her chair. "I think little Kendra here is delusional. I think she actually believes someone wants to spend time with her. Isn't that cute, Tyler?" "Adorable," Tyler agreed, positioning himself on Kendra's other side. That's when Marcus walked in. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Kendra hunched over her books with Blake and Tyler looming over her like vultures. His expression darkened, and he started walking toward their table with purpose. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice carrying a note of warning. "Is there a problem here?" Blake's grin got even wider. "Oh, look who it is. The knight in shining armor. No problem at all, California. Just having a chat with our friend Kendra here." Marcus stepped closer, his jaw set. "Looks like you're bothering her. Maybe you should find somewhere else to hang out." The library had gone completely quiet. Even Mrs. Patterson looked up from her desk, sensing the tension in the air. Kendra wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never come back. This was exactly what she had been afraid of, that her problems would somehow touch Marcus, that Blake's cruelty would spread to include him. "Marcus, it's okay," she said quietly. "Really, it's fine." But Blake was already moving, his predator instincts fully engaged. He had found new prey, and he wasn't about to let it escape. "You know what, California?" Blake said, stepping closer to Marcus. "I don't think you understand how things work around here. See, Kendra and we have an arrangement. She knows her place, and I remind her of it when she forgets. And right now, She's forgotten. In one swift motion, Blake reached down and grabbed the bottom of Kendra's blue sweater, yanking it upward. The fabric stretched and tore as he pulled, exposing her stomach and the plain white bra she wore underneath. Kendra gasped and tried to pull the sweater back down, but Blake held it firm, his grip twisting the fabric. "Look at that," Blake said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Little Kendra's not so tough after all. What do you think, California? Still want to be her hero?" The library erupted in gasps and nervous laughter. Students pulled out their phones, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. Mrs. Patterson stood up behind her desk, but she seemed frozen, unsure of how to handle the situation. Marcus's face went completely white, then red with rage. "Let her go," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Or what?" Blake taunted, giving Kendra's sweater another yank. "You gonna make me?" That's when something inside Kendra snapped. 6 years of training, 6 years of discipline, 6 years of holding back, all of it went out the window in that moment. She had endured Blake's cruelty, had turned the other cheek, had tried to be the better person. But he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He had humiliated her in front of Marcus, had exposed her in front of the entire library, had made her feel small and helpless and weak. Not anymore. Kendra's right hand shot up, her fingers closing around Blake's wrist with a grip that made him gasp. In one fluid motion, she twisted his arm away from her body, using a basic Aikido technique that Master Kim had taught her years ago. Blake yelped and stumbled backward, his cocky grin replaced by a look of shock and pain. "Don't," Kendra said, her voice carrying a tone that no one at Jefferson High had ever heard before. "Ever touch me again." She stood up slowly, pulling her sweater back into place, her movements controlled and deliberate. Blake was cradling his wrist, his face pale with surprise and the beginning of fear. Tyler took a step back, suddenly unsure of himself. "What the hell?" Blake sputtered. "You crazy!" He reached for her again, probably intending to grab her by the shoulders and show everyone that her little move had been a fluke. But Kendra was ready this time. She caught his wrist again, this time twisting it behind his back in a move that sent him to his knees on the library floor. "I said don't touch me," she repeated, her voice still eerily calm. The library was completely silent now. Even the students who had been taking pictures had lowered their phones, too shocked to keep recording. Mrs. Patterson was standing behind her desk with her mouth hanging open, and Marcus was staring at Kendra like he had never seen her before. Blake tried to struggle, but Kendra's grip was iron. Years of grappling practice had taught her exactly how much pressure to apply, exactly how to position her body to maintain control. Blake might have been bigger and stronger, but he was untrained and off balance, and she had the advantage of surprise. "Let me go," Blake hissed, his voice strained with pain and embarrassment. "Are you going to behave yourself?" Kendra asked, her tone almost conversational. "Tyler, do something," Blake snapped at his friend. But Tyler was backing away, his usual swagger completely gone. He had seen the speed and precision of Kendra's movements, had recognized something dangerous in her suddenly confident posture. This wasn't the same girl they had been tormenting for weeks. "I asked you a question," Kendra said, applying just a little more pressure to Blake's wrist. "Are you going to behave yourself?" "Yes," Blake gasped. "Jesus, yes, just let me go." Kendra released him and stepped back, her hands loose at her sides but ready to move if necessary. Blake scrambled to his feet, his face red with humiliation and rage. He looked around the library, taking in the stares of his classmates, the shocked expression of the librarian, the way Tyler was still backing away from him. "This isn't over," Blake said, his voice shaking with anger. "Yes," Kendra said quietly. "It is." Something in her tone, in the way she stood, in the complete absence of fear in her eyes, made Blake take a step backward. For the first time in his life, he was looking at someone who wasn't afraid of him, someone who could hurt him if she chose to. The realization was written all over his face. "You're crazy," he muttered. but there was no conviction in his voice. "Maybe," Kendra agreed, "but I'm not helpless." Blake looked around the library one more time, taking in the faces of his classmates. Some looked shocked, others seemed almost relieved, but none of them looked at him with the same mixture of fear and respect they had shown before. His kingdom was crumbling, and everyone could see it. "Come on, Tyler," he said, trying to salvage some dignity. "Let's get out of here." But Tyler was already gone, having slipped out during the confrontation. Blake was alone, facing down a girl he had tormented for weeks and losing. He turned and walked out of the library, trying to maintain some semblance of his usual swagger, but everyone could see that something fundamental had changed. The library remained silent for a long moment after Blake left. Then slowly, the normal sounds of studying resumed. Papers rustling, keyboards clicking, quiet conversations. But the atmosphere had shifted permanently. Word would spread quickly through Jefferson High, and by morning, everyone would know that Blake Morrison had been taken down by quiet little Kendra Thorne. Marcus was the first to speak. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Kendra looked at him, suddenly aware of how she must appear, hair disheveled, sweater wrinkled, standing in the middle of the library like some kind of warrior. "I'm fine," she said, and for the first time in weeks, she actually meant it. "That was..." Marcus shook his head, searching for words. "That was incredible. Where did you learn to do that?" "My dad made me take martial arts classes," Kendra said, sitting back down at their table. "I've been training for about 6 years." 6 years? Marcus stared at her with new respect. "And you never fought back before?" Kendra shrugged. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I kept hoping they would just get bored and leave me alone. But they didn't." "No," Kendra said quietly. "They didn't." Marcus sat down across from her, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I was ready to jump in there and try to help you. I'm glad I didn't. I probably would have just made things worse." "You were willing to help," Kendra said. "That matters." They worked on their project for the rest of the afternoon, but the dynamic between them had changed. Marcus asked more questions about her training, and Kendra found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told him about Master Kim's studio, about the tournaments she had won, about the discipline and focus that martial arts had taught her. Marcus listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and making her laugh with his observations about the absurdity of high school social hierarchies. The next morning, Kendra walked into Jefferson High with her head held high for the first time in months. She could feel the stares of her classmates, could hear the whispered conversations that followed her down the hallway. But instead of the usual mixture of pity and disdain, she detected something new in their voices. Respect, curiosity, and maybe even a little fear. Blake was waiting by her locker, Tyler nowhere to be seen. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes and his usual perfect hair disheveled. When he saw Kendra approaching, he straightened up, but there was none of his usual arrogance in his posture. "We need to talk," he said. "No," Kendra said simply, working the combination on her lock. "We don't." "Look, about yesterday." "Yesterday you humiliated me in front of half the school," Kendra said, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "You put your hands on me without permission. You tried to make me feel small and helpless and worthless. There's nothing to talk about." Blake's face flushed red. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did." Kendra turned to face him, her dark eyes steady and unafraid. "You meant every bit of it. You enjoyed it. The only thing you're sorry about is that it didn't work." Blake opened his mouth to argue, but something in Kendra's expression stopped him. This wasn't the same girl he had been tormenting for weeks. This girl looked like she could break him in half without breaking a sweat, and they both knew it. "I won't bother you anymore," he said finally. "Good," Kendra said, "because if you do, what happened yesterday will seem like a friendly conversation." Blake nodded and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Kendra watched him go, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had won, but victory felt different than she had expected. There was no joy in seeing Blake's confidence shattered, no pleasure in his humiliation. There was only a quiet sense of justice served and a determination to never let anyone make her feel powerless again. The rest of the day passed in a blur of changed dynamics. Students who had previously ignored Kendra now nodded respectfully when she passed in the halls. Teachers seemed to notice her for the first time, calling on her in class and actually listening to her answers. Even the cafeteria felt different. Instead of eating alone, she found herself joined by Marcus and a few other students who had apparently been waiting for someone to stand up to Blake Morrison. Tyler tried to approach her once during lunch, but backed away when she looked at him with the same steady gaze she had given Blake. He had learned his lesson quickly. Without Blake's leadership, he was just another bully without the courage to act alone. The most surprising change came from Mrs. Patterson. The elderly librarian approached Kendra after school, her expression thoughtful. "I should have stepped in yesterday," she said quietly. "I should have protected you. I'm sorry." Kendra was touched by the woman's honesty. "It's okay, Mrs. Patterson. Sometimes we have to protect ourselves." "You did more than protect yourself," the librarian said. "You protected everyone he might have hurt in the future. That took courage." That evening, Kendra sat in Master Kim's studio after her regular training session, still processing everything that had happened. Her instructor, a small Korean man with kind eyes and calloused hands, had listened to her story without judgment. "You used your training to protect yourself," he said finally. "That is what it's for. But you also showed restraint. You could have hurt him badly, but you chose not to. That shows wisdom." "It didn't feel wise," Kendra admitted. "It felt like I was losing control." "Control is not about never getting angry," Master Kim said. "Control is about choosing how to respond to that anger. You chose to defend yourself without becoming the aggressor. That is the mark of a true martial artist." Kendra nodded, understanding finally beginning to dawn. She had been afraid that fighting back would make her like Blake, but she had been wrong. Blake used his strength to hurt and humiliate others for his own amusement. She had used her strength to protect herself and, as Mrs. Patterson had pointed out, to protect others who might have been Blake's future victims. The weeks that followed brought a new normal to Jefferson High. Blake Morrison, his reputation shattered, found himself on the receiving end of the social isolation he had once inflicted on others. His former followers abandoned him, and he ate lunch alone, hunched over his food like a man carrying a great weight. Tyler transferred to another school, unable to handle the whispered comments and knowing looks. Kendra, meanwhile, flourished. Her friendship with Marcus deepened into something more, and she found herself part of a group of students who valued kindness and authenticity over social hierarchy. She started a martial arts club at school, teaching other students basic self-defense techniques. Master Kim visited the school to demonstrate traditional forms, and Kendra found herself serving as a bridge between two worlds she had kept separate for so long. The final resolution came on a cold December morning, almost 2 months after the library incident. Kendra was at her locker, gathering books for her first class, when she noticed Blake approaching. Her body tensed automatically, but something in his posture told her this encounter would be different. "Kendra," he said quietly, stopping a respectful distance away. "I wanted to apologize." She studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or sarcasm, but found only genuine remorse. "Okay," she said, closing her locker and turning to face him. "I was a coward," Blake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I made you feel small because I felt small. I hurt you because I thought it would make me feel better about myself. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Kendra considered his words, weighing them against months of humiliation and pain. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want to be better," Blake said. "I want to be someone I can respect, and I can't do that until I face what I've done." "What about Tyler? What about all the other people you hurt?" Blake's shoulders sagged. "Tyler won't talk to me. Most of the others won't either. I don't blame them, but I had to start somewhere, and I wanted to start with you." Kendra felt a complex mix of emotions: anger for what he had put her through, sadness for the boy who had been so broken that he could only feel whole by breaking others, and a grudging respect for the courage it must have taken to face her now. "I accept your apology," she said finally, "but that doesn't mean we're friends, and it doesn't mean I'll forget what you did." "I don't expect you to," Blake said. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm trying to be different." He turned and walked away, leaving Kendra alone with her thoughts. She watched him go, this boy who had once seemed so powerful and intimidating, now just another student trying to find his way through the complicated maze of growing up. Marcus appeared at her side, having witnessed the entire exchange. "How do you feel?" he asked. Kendra considered the question. "I feel free," she said finally. "Like I can finally close that chapter and move on." "You're amazing," Marcus said, taking her hand. "You know that, right?" Kendra smiled, squeezing his fingers. "I'm learning," she said. As they walked down the hallway together, Kendra reflected on everything that had changed since that day in the library. She had learned that strength wasn't about being the biggest or the loudest or the most feared. Real strength came from knowing who you were, standing up for what was right, and choosing to be better even when others chose to be worse. She had also learned that sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to show them that their victim was stronger than they had imagined. But the most important lesson was that strength without compassion was just another form of bullying, and that true victory came not from destroying your enemies, but from refusing to let them destroy you. The girl who had once hidden in shadows now walked in the light, her head held high, her heart full of hope for the future. She had found her voice, her strength, and her place in the world, and she would never let anyone make her feel small again.